Hey guys, Magna back here with yet another Legacy of the Void cast. Today we're going to be watching a game between Stephano and Neuro. Stephano being the blue Zerg and Neuro being the red Zerg. So our first real look at ZvZ, at least on this channel. Those of you that don't know who Stephano is, you've got a lot of history to catch up on. He was basically cemented himself as the best foreigner in the world for quite a long time until he basically just stopped playing the game. Still is around, still playing games every once in a while, but not super seriously, or at least not as seriously was before when he was winning big premier tournaments. Neuro, not too familiar with this guy, but he was kind enough to post a replay on a public site somewhere so I could grab it and cast it for you guys. So this is a cold cast. I have no idea what happens in this game. This will just be kind of a learning experience for all of us. This is shaping up to look like hatch first for both players. So this will be a little bit of an economic game where we'll have a little bit of downtime, but obviously nowhere near the downtime where we would have normally in StarCraft 2, because both these guys are going hatch first, and both of them got implanted before a minute into the game. So obviously very much faster considering the extra economy and whatnot. Have to see how greedy both these guys are. Stephano going gas before pool, whereas the pool just coming down right now for Neuro. No gas quite yet. And I'm really unclear on how builds are going to clash, especially in the early game with ZvZ, considering that was so sensitive in the past. But now it's going to take a little while to figure out how all that works and see, say someone goes for like a Baneling all-in, how you're supposed to counter that, or if somebody can go gasless like Neuro is trying out here and what it'll be vulnerable to. But it was all figured out in the previous iterations of Heart of the Swarm, or rather of StarCraft, but Legacy of the Void's a totally different ballgame. Absolutely no idea what's going to happen. So, yeah, nothing too special going on here so far. Both guys' pools coming up relatively quickly. Again, this is totally a cold cast. I have no idea what happens in this game, so it should... usually people only post really cool replays to sites like this, so hopefully it'll be fairly interesting. Both of them grabbing a queen. Initial saddle links for Neuro, which is something you'll definitely always want to get, just to at least protect against somebody making 4 or 6 Zerglings and just randomly sending them into your base. You can avoid some drone kills and stuff like that. Or you can send them across the map, maybe you get a scout on your opponent, check them out, see what they're doing. But the queen's now just about to pop. And we're going to see some divergence in tech here in just a second. As we can see, Stephano is mining a lot of gas, but has no Zergling speed yet. So you typically want to grab speed with that first 100 gas, and I'm not sure what he's saving up for. Or if it's just such a new game, maybe he's distracted. Yeah, that's what I figured. Just distracted, probably. Maybe thinking he might go for a fast layer or something weird like that. But he knows he just goes ahead and grabs speed. Still fully mining gas, though, so I'm not sure what else this could lead into. I would think a quick lair, but I think a lair this quickly on 2 bases is probably not going to be like a thing, considering a 3rd base on this map is really far away. You can either take one that's kind of closer this way, but it's a little more towards your opponent. So I was thinking something like a muta build might be possible, but I don't think so. He's still mining a lot of gas, so I have no idea what this is going to be for. The Roach Warren drops for Neuro, so we can see he's going to probably start going into Roaches. He has a lair faster than Stephano, despite being behind on a gas. So we will see what this all means, I suppose. Here's a Roach Warren now for Stephano, so maybe we're going to get into a little bit of a Ravager action against one another. And I know a lot of people have been talking about that quite a bit, trying to see if Ravager versus Ravager is going to be the new thing in ZvZ. But both these guys really just kind of hanging back, making a lot of drones, nothing too aggressive, both pushing their creep out just a little bit. The wall's starting to come up here for Stephano now, so he can start to block off against any sort of shenanigans and all-ins and whatnot. 3rd base finally on the way for one of these 2 players. Stephano's going to go ahead and be the first to poke out there. Roach is on the way now for Neuro, +1 on the way for Stephano, so kind of regulating a little bit into Roach versus Roach. So we will see even going up to 10 Roaches right now. So this could be a pretty big commitment. Let's also bear in mind that there's no speed on Zerglings here for Neuro. So he's not going to be able to just run out on the map, try to cancel a 3rd or anything weird like that. It'll be kind of bludgeoning type of style between these 2 players if that decides to happen. Here we go. This is where the game starts to get weird. There's a Nidus network on the way for Neuro, and Nidus worms cannot be attacked while they're building. In the meantime, Stephano, these pods right here, these are Ravager pods. You can see these big dudes pop out of there, and they can shoot down this, I think it's called corrosive bile or something weird. I can't see the name of it because of unfortunate UI bug right now, but this game's going to start getting a little bit interesting, whereas before in ZvZ you might have to wait for a little bit later in the game for something to actually start happening. So jumping right into the action, are we here? Despite the fairly heavy economic opening, Nidus Worm's on the way, and from Stephano's vision, he can technically see it, but we don't know if he's actually looking at it right now. Obviously not, because he has no response on his units. So this Nidus Worm is going to finish. Everything is going to pop out here relatively safely. Stephano has that moment of, oh crap, I can't believe I forgot about this. Queen's coming out right now. The Ravager is going to start launching their bombs down, and it's going to nail a couple of these Queens. There's a lot of transfuses here, but I think the Ravagers are going to hold this off fairly easily, at the very least zone this out. And what's funny about these Ravagers is the more you get, the more damage they do, because it's hard to avoid these big blobs of damage. So the Ravager is doing very, very well holding this off. Still a pretty close fight, but you would expect this to be a little bit more in the Zerg's favor that got the actual Nidus down. But you can see if these Ravagers hit, they deal a lot of damage. So Stephano's going to hold this fairly economically. Has some roaches on the way to try to rally through this. Also, the base attack for the Ravagers is pretty good, so there's no slouch there. Second Nidus network is coming up over here at Stephano's other base, that being the third base. But Stephano should hold this just fine, as these Queens are getting super red. He actually kills a couple of his own units accidentally with that Ravager shot. Here comes the Nidus network, or Nidus Worm now finishing up. So roaches and Queens just pouring out of here. A lot of very interesting tactics coming down here from Neuro, making use of those new Nidus networks. And you can see how far the distance is on this map in particular between those first and third bases. So Stephano's having a hard time recovering to all this, even to the point where he's going to lose his third base. Neuro should stick around a little longer and at least pick that off before leaving, because he could load back up into that Nidus at any time. But this is so red, he could just turn around, shoot it a couple times, and call it good. He should at least get this. It's going to be really close, and I think just with these last couple of roaches, he should be able to close this out. But Stephano at least doesn't die to this right away. Losing a third base is quite the heavy expense, but funnily enough, look at the supply differences. Stephano's still sitting up at 90 and Neuro's at 60, so I guess killing the third base seems all nice and good, but surprise, you're just barely starting your own third base back at home. So at this point, it seems like Stephano has a little bit better tech, fairly even on the worker counts. The Ravagers still being alive, even though it's just a handful of them, is going to be a big deal. Only 3 left, but still, you can see the cost efficiency of these guys in ZvZ. It's especially against bigger armies where these guys start to shine, because if we were back in this location, by the way, an Overlord just getting bombed, only 3 shots doesn't quite kill it, so you need a 4th, and you can't see up there now, so that was a little bit awkward. He just bombs it normally, and that's kind of funny because you can still hit stuff on the high ground despite not being able to see it. So he just shot on the low ground, kind of right here on the edge, and it still hit the Overlord because of the splash damage. So some really cool stuff coming down here. But anyway, what I was saying about the Ravagers is that they tend to shine a lot more in bigger armies, or rather against bigger armies, which is interesting because it seems like there's a lot of units in Legacy of the Void that are purposefully trying to counter really big blobby armies, to the point where if you had Ravagers, you could just launch them all over the place over here, and there's really nowhere for the army to retreat if it's that big. Something is going to get hit sooner or later. But this is starting to evolve into Ravager versus Ravager, which can make for some crazy fights. The big thing that Stephano really has going for him, though, is his creep spread is way out here, so there's not really any way that Neuro can hope to surprise him in any way as far as map movements. So we'll see how that all starts to pan out. In terms of economy, still fairly even game. Stephano's still up by a little bit of workers, starting to head across the map here. These Ravagers are still pretty fast on creeps, so these guys definitely have a lot going for them. The big difference as well is that +2 is going to finish up for Stephano about at the same time with Neuro's +1 is going to finish. Also, keep in mind, Tunneling Claws is by default on roaches now, so if you get burrow movement, Hydralisk Den actually morphing here. I was going to say, so if you get burrow on there, the Tunneling Claws will just come down normally. A couple of Ravagers getting bombed here. The zoning from both sides is going to be really interesting, and you don't want to walk your own Ravagers into these shots because they do deal a lot of damage even to yourself. But I was just going to mention that the Lurker Den is now on the way for Stephano, so this will be the first time I've really had a good look at Lurkers in this game. Here comes an Overseer, maybe trying to do a little bit more Nidus shenanigans. There's actually a Nidus going down right next to the Lurker Den, so you have to wonder if Stephano is actually paying attention to this. It looks like he sees it, so this would be one of those weird points where you don't want to really show that you know it's open until they start to dump units out, and then maybe you can kill the worm. But since it's so obvious, he just kills it right away. Maybe could have waited for stuff to pop out of there, but obviously that'll always be a risk. So interesting little ideas here, considering it's a matter of, do I wait for that to finish and do I just let him come out a little bit and then trap those units, or do I just kill the worm and not take any risk at all? This animation is really cool though. Like, I couldn't be any more happy with this unit right now in terms of how cool it is, and it just looks cool too. Everything about the Ravager, I have to say, has been very nice so far. Overseer getting bombed, even microing out of this a little bit, so kind of cool stuff going on even when nothing is really going on. It's a little bit of a dance for his life, trying to wall this off, even just taunting him a little bit that he can't get him. Kind of funny stuff happening on both sides. So Lurker Ravager is basically what we're seeing here from Stephano. Really something I had not even considered how it's going to match up against in ZvZ, but the zoning of both of these unit types is going to be crazy, especially if Neuro's not walking around with an Overseer, which is pretty commonplace by this point to have been walking around with Overseers anyway. But does he even have one, actually? I'm not sure. If he did, yeah, he has 3. So there's 2 more of them back here. They're not with his army necessarily. And there's the 3rd one over on the side, spotting for a potential nidus play or something. Extra bases coming up. Infestation Pit coming up now for Neuro, starting to get a little bit into a late game. And this is a hive coming up in ZvZ, which is not something you'd normally see in the other iterations. Stephano, once again, noticing that the nidus is coming down, just going to surround it right away and kill it right away, not take any risk. And obviously Neuro can see that, as you can have a little bit of a vision radius outside of it. So I guess the good thing about this for Stephano's sake is that niduses still cost money. So spawning those worms still costs a decent amount. I think it's still 100. Again, there are some UI bugs in Heart of the Storm right now where I can't mouse over those and really see exactly what's going on. A couple of Ravagers, I believe, with Tunnel and Claws just coming right in here and trying to be annoying. He can reburrow those at any time, considering there is an Overseer morphing right there. Maybe try to get him out of there in time. You can see these burrow roaches are really, really fast. Holy crap. That has to be a speed upgrade, I'm pretty sure, because those burrow roaches are insane. Those are like literally as fast as the other ones, maybe even a little bit faster. But man, those are really, really quick. You also don't want to bomb your own drones here, by the way, which is why we're not seeing anything come down like that, because that will kill your own drones. So you definitely do have to be careful. Both these guys getting pretty insane banks right now, and surprisingly enough, +1 Carapace coming down for both players at the same time. It feels really late in the game, but if you look at the game timer, it's only 12 minutes and 30 seconds. But both these guys are just taking bases everywhere, so it kind of shows you how fast the economy pacing is for Legacy of the Void. This upgrade right here that's being researched on the Lurker Den will increase the Lurker range from 6 to 9. So these Lurkers will have insane range, to the point where they'll outrange pretty much everything that the Zerg can field, unless they brought out something like Broodlords, where that range probably wouldn't matter as much. But even still, the Lurkers would probably kill the Broodlings really fast, to the point where the Broodlords probably wouldn't do too much. Here's something cool coming down, is an Ultralisk Cavern. And the new armor buff to Ultralisk is actually insane, to the point where if you get a bunch of Ultras on the field, it'll be almost impossible to get them off the field cost efficiently. So here comes some bombs coming down, actually getting some pretty decent hits here. The Ravagers kind of just blobbing up here and sending roaches forward. Pretty nice little fight there from Stephano, getting a pretty big advantage. But the downside for Stephano is he's losing a lot of his other bases, as there are roaches in both bases due to those Tunnel and Claws, dealing a lot of damage here. So the supply makes it look like Stephano got a great trade, but the banks say a different story. Neuro's bank is huge, and Stephano's bank is really starting to dwindle, just because he's had so many economy problems throughout this game. So Neuro really doing a good job of multi-pronging Stephano a lot of the times. We'll have to see the worker counts here. Only 44 for Stephano, and 35 were killed throughout the whole state of this game. 7 Ultras on the way. If this chitinous plating finishes, Crackling all finishes as well. This will be pretty hard for Stephano to hold. There are still a lot of Lurkers here, so the Cracklings probably won't do anything in that regard, but these Ultras will basically pop out if you can finish up the chitinous plating with +6 armor, I'm pretty sure, is going to be the count, which is just crazy considering how much damage that means over time. Here's some Lurkers definitely getting some hits on these roaches here, but the roaches still being really annoying with this burrow tactic. So you can see burrow roaches definitely still very much a thing in ZvZ, and the roaches will eventually get cleaned up. Still, look how fast these burrow roaches are. They're super quick. I'm pretty sure that's a lot faster than before. Ultras coming in here. The Lurker's actually doing really well against these, so these are all pretty softened up right now. Even more Lurkers coming over here from the side, so being really annoying. Doesn't unfortunately get too many of those. And you also want to think about, if you're Neuro, adding some queens into this composition so you can heal up these ultras. So he does have a few mixed in there. Looks like a handful, 4 of them, just to keep those things going. But this many ultras, and especially with this size of bank, I have to say that Neuro is in a spectacular position right now. Lots of changelings sitting out here. I believe those are Stephano's changelings, if I could guess. No, those are Neuro's changelings. Never mind. But yeah, still more shenanigans trying to go on. Stephano's just being really turtly here with the turtles, or rather, the turtles, lol. The Lurkers and the Overseers, just trying to defend against these multi-pronged attacks. But Neuro's been up a base, he's been up an economy for a lot of this period, and by the time these armies finally clash, these ultras are going to be just almost impossible to stop. You can see the +5 armor, plus they have 1 base armor, so these ultras are at 6 armor right now. And he's just going to come in here. He finally does bring an Overseer with these ultras. Going to crash through these Lurkers. The Lurker's still doing pretty well here. I'm surprised how much damage they actually put out. But Lurker's burrowing once again. Stephano trying to micro for his life here. I'll try to zoom out and get as much into this battle as I possibly can. But the Ultra is doing pretty well, or rather the Ultra is taking quite a bit of damage. Stephano actually holds this for the time being, but there's still a lot more Zerglings. These are Cracklings, by the way. Ultralists coming up as well, being refilled. And as soon as he can get a decent surround on these, we should see these things drop like flies, but the Lurkers are doing a lot better than I expected. So it's developing to be a very interesting set of strategies between both of these guys. And Stephano, with that last fight, it's not like he won that fight fairly convincingly, and what that did for him is it really evened up the bank. We still have more fights coming up here as the Ultras are trying to crash into these Roaches, but the Roaches are actually doing pretty well for themselves. The downside of these Ultras, they're only at +1 attack, whereas these Roaches are at +3, so they are mowing through these pretty well, and getting pretty bad trades with these Ultras is Neuro. So Stephano just sticking on the Lurker Roach type of strategy, doing really well against these Ultras right now. Still, Neuro's being stubborn. He's just going to go ahead and say, you know what, these Ultralists should be doing more damage, and Stephano's going to start adding in Hydras. The downside of Hydras, though, against these Ultras is that the Ultras are going to be at such high armor, and the Hydras have a lower base damage output than Roaches, so while they deal a lot of damage per second, a lot of this damage gets muted by the Ultra armor. Here's another attack coming down here. The Lurker's doing really well. Ultras, or rather Roaches, are starting to flood in. You can see a lot of Ultras spawning. Could have just turned around and killed this pretty easily. The Crackling's coming up, and look at them just completely evaporate to these Lurkers. So Lurkers, pretty good unit, guys. They're doing really, really well in this game. You can see the Roaches just kind of scrambling around, trying to split against the Ultras the best they can. But man, these Lurkers are being really annoying. Really dealing a lot of free damage to these Ultras. A lot of these have tons of kills. Stephano taking out another base. The Lurker's trying to, or rather the Ultra's trying to catch up. And every single time he runs over this is just free damage every single time they come across, because he's not carrying Overseers with his army. And Neuro's looking like he went from a very ahead position to a very dead position, considering there was so much damage output from this army, and especially these Lurkers are really the heroes of the game right now. Finally, the Ultra is able to turn around, try to get some damage on these, but this Lurker has 20 kills, 13, 20. Man, these things are really insane. Doing way more damage than I expected. Morphing more Lurkers is Stephano, considering they basically carried him through this game when he had a huge bank disadvantage. And by now, the downside for Neuro is he's just mining out. He's lost 2 bases. He has basically no economy right now. There's like 1.5 bases mining at best. Another Nidus Swarm's trying to come up here, but Stephano's just going to quickly surround it and say, you know what, there's no way this is ever going to do anything. And Neuro's looking pretty dead here, man. But this was a really crazy and cool game. It's really nice to see ZvZ especially evolve from the very stagnant Roach versus Roach, endless lair tech, basically mirror matchup battles. Granted, the Ultralists didn't really work out. Might give you something to think about, maybe switching into Broodlords or something a little bit, faster than that, because the Lurkers deal an amazing amount of damage against these Ultras. You can see even with just the one, if they're able to land some consistent hits here, they just fall like flies. And they still have a lot of armor, so it's not like these guys are just Zerglings or something. So Ultras coming in here just getting pulverized. There's so many Lurkers, wow. And these Lurkers are really fast when they're unburrowed as well. So 21 Lurkers on the field. This is a ton, to the point where if these siege up anywhere, there's no way that Neuro's ever going to be able to break this. Another Nidus coming down, trying to be a little bit cute. Only a handful of Zerglings get out. They don't really do too much. As you can see, even Stephano, or rather, those are Neuro's changelings, never mind. I wish it would show the color of the changelings of who they belong to, but anyway. Stephano starting to just siege up in really irritating position. And the supply deficits really tell the story right now. Neuro just doesn't really have anything left. Trying to get some Ravagers out. And that's another interesting point, is if you could get on these Lurkers before... Neuro says superb performance. If you get on these Lurkers before they get their range upgrades, you could probably bomb out the Lurkers with your Ravagers and try to just make a little bit of a micro battle. But Neuro says marvelous work and well done. Interesting game there. I have yet to see Lurkers kind of make an appearance, but in ZvZ they seem super strong. So very cool replay there, and I hope you guys enjoyed that ZvZ. Not a phrase that's uttered too particularly often in the previous iterations of StarCraft, but ZvZ for Legacy of the Void is looking very cool, very speedy, lots of counterattacks, lots of cool unit compositions, and especially the higher echelon of tech coming into the play a lot earlier than before. So very cool game, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll be casting a lot more games, bringing you guys a lot more content, so definitely subscribe if you enjoyed this or if you enjoyed any of my work. I have a lot of tutorials for all the other races as well from Heart of the Swarm, and I'm planning on making them for Legacy of the Void, so that should be coming up soon as well. So yeah, check it out. I'll be back with more videos really soon. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you later.